Hello and welcome to the Kristen Weardon Show, where we create inspiring conversations with spectacular guests. Today I have Jim Bloom, or Colonel Jim Bloom, from the Collier County Sheriff's Department for 30 years now?
31.
31.
Last week was 31 years.
Oh, well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
I'm glad you could join us today. This is great.
It's
I know
an honor.
you have a very busy schedule with your work. A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit busy.
A little bit. So, but I just was talking to you and I did not know this. You are originally from Pennsylvania. Now, I know not everybody's from Florida. I mean, as we all know, everybody in Naples
Most people from here aren't from Florida, actually.
Right.
As
yeah.
we all know.
Yeah. So you grew up in Pennsylvania. So tell me how that, where,
Sure.
what, who?
I was a military. My father was in Special Forces and career military. So I was actually born in Frankfurt, Germany. And then when I was right about 2.5, 3, he retired. We came back. He was going to work at the Carlisle War College there. Plus, we had family in a little town called Perry County. My grandparents had a big dairy farm up there. And so, long story short, we came home. And when I was about 4.5, unfortunately, he passed away. And so my mother, being a professional military wife, was thrown into raising three children at a very young age. And so then my grandparents helped raise me back and forth. And so I spent just phenomenal years on the farm. And between dairy, we usually would have between about 80 to 100 dairy head. And then he had a hobby. His passion was quarter horses, which he passed on to my brother. My brother still has about a 44-acre farm up there, and he's a retired police officer now. But he also, that's his hobby, and raising
It's a hobby, raising horses.
It's an expensive hobby. Better him than me.
An expensive hobby and a lot of work.
A lot of work.
And the dairy farm,
yes.
A lot of work.
Yeah, I really owe my grandfather really my work ethic. He taught me so much over the years. They literally only took 2 vacations their entire life, my grandfather, my grandmother. And that was when I was born. They came over to Germany to see me. And when my sister was born, they came to see her. And that was it. Because who are you going to get to come take care of, 80 to 100 dairy head, twice a day, milking and then feeding and cleaning and along with everything else. So it was, it's a 365-day job a year. And I respect all farmers in this country for what they do and what they sacrifice for us, quite frankly.
And I think we don't give them enough credit. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring that up when I found out about it, because I know my grandparents, they had they're Italian, they had the big garden, and everybody had to pitch in. If you were going to eat from it, you had to, contribute to it, pull the weeds and things like that. Yeah. And I know how much work that took. And it wasn't a small one. It was probably the size of this room.
Sure.
Because it was an Italian family, and they don't do anything small when it comes to gardening.
No.
But when it comes to our farmers, I think people, because we go to the grocery store now, and it's underrated, what does it take to get that to the table?
Absolutely.
And you have a place like Seed to Table where a lot of that is local even.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny you bring up about gardens, because my grandmother would have a minimum of 2 and sometimes 3. And when you say here, honestly, each of her gardens would be about 5 times the size of this. And she canned everything we raised. And where we lived at, once again, it's going to sound like a cliche, but there was a small mom and pop, it wasn't a grocery store, a little store, more of a butcher shop actually, that way you could go get things. But everything else was literally they raised and canned and froze, and that's what we lived on. And so
I noticed that's gone away, but I over my generation, I think it's gone away, the canning and all that.
Yeah.
But I see this small little movement on the side over here.
Oh, it is.
Where people want to know how to can, or they want to know, like, oh, I can take vegetables and what do I do with them if I can't eat them all? Oh, I can store them, save them somehow.
Yeah. No, I agree. You see that more now, whether it's what's going on in the world, and that's a whole other topic in itself. But I think people have taken it more sincerely of, should something happen, how are they going to take care of their families? How are they going to survive and things like that? So I think you're right. I think it's kind of going full circle now. You see more and more people taking interest in that have the ability to do it.
The sustainability too, I think, has a little bit to do with that.
Right.
There's the generation of the sustainability and the climate and all things like that. So it's like the two are merging a little bit when it comes to being able to take care of yourself.
Sure.
I know in your job, we're just going to throw the questions out again. I know in your job, you probably see a lot over the years of people who they don't have the skills to take care of themselves. They were never raised with them.
Sure.
Or somehow they got derailed from them.
Yeah.
And I think that those kind of skills are a great place to start.
Oh, it is. bleeds over not in personal life, but we'll talk about some of this later on, even with the sheriff's office and the sheriff's mentality, along with all of us in the command staff and the agency in general. But it's about making your own destiny and, taking care of yourself and making sure you have everything in place, resiliency, and be able to move forward. It's very important, because if you're counting on somebody else to do it for you, you might be in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that's another mentality that is kind of prevalent right now. At least I see it on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't only get you so far when you rely on other people.
Sure.
And another reason I think entrepreneurship has taken off too. I've had a lot of entrepreneurs here. And it's because they wanted to be self-sustaining.
Yeah,
they didn't want to rely on somebody else. Speaking of the sheriff's department, so you've been there 31 years, but you started in corrections.
I did, 31 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so corrections is a whole different animal from what I've seen and understand than being on the street, I guess, or as a deputy.
Yeah. No.
And now you are in the upper. I don't know the rankings. Come on, help me out here.
I'm the undersheriff.
Okay.
Yeah, the title is undersheriff. The rank's colonel.
Okay.
And I work right with the sheriff, and blessed with his leadership and him entrusting me, along with the agency and the community, of helping move the agency forward every day.
Yeah. So you were in corrections, and then you thought about changing to the DEA even.
I did. Well, actually out of college. So I got my 4-year degree at Eastern Kentucky University in police administration. And
so Pennsylvania to Kentucky.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then from there, I was going to go to work at Cincinnati PD. And my now ex-wife, she was raised down here in Naples, Florida, and she wanted to come home. And I was like, I'm going to go work for this big PD up here and so forth. Long story short, her dad came up, talked me into coming down and doing a ride along with Steve Lloyd.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of people don't know this fun fact. Steve Lloyd's the reason I'm at the Collier County Sheriff's Office.
Really?
I spent 2 days with him when he was our youth relations deputy at Lally. Okay. And I spent 2 days just nonstop with him. And I was sold. I went back literally and told all the guys that, up at the university, and that I'm going to go down and work for the sheriff's office. And they're like, are you an idiot? Are you crazy? Because everybody thinks the sheriff's office, these small little, good old boy systems. They didn't realize, the size and demeanor of, what we have here. And then we've almost doubled since I've gotten here, and both.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how I ended up here, and started in corrections, because back then, they had what was called a jail first policy. Unless you came with prior law enforcement experience and or military experience, you had to go to the jail first policy, even with a college degree. And I'm not going to lie, it was one of those, do I do it or do I not do it? And I went back and forth. But I really, after spending time with Steve Lloyd in the agency in youth relations in that unit, I was like, that's what I want to do. And the rest is history. I came down here. Did I think it was about 18 to 20 months in the jail system, transferred over to patrol.
That's what it's called, patrol. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. And then I was actually supposed to go to East Naples, but I actually had, at that point had some family in Immokalee, and with it being a farming community, as you're aware, and so forth, I was like, that's where I want to go to work. And so I actually went in and asked the captain at the time if I could go out to Immokalee versus East Naples, because that's where I was assigned to go. And everybody looked at me like, nobody wants to go.
Because nobody wants to go to Immokalee.
They didn't, which is a shame. Immokalee's a great community.
It is.
I gotta tell you,
it is. I've done a lot of work out there. It's a lot of charity work out there. It's people. It's again another underrated,
really
unknown about place.
It's a great place. Yeah, I love the people out there. Love the community. And so then, I was. He granted it, and I was able to go to Immokalee. And then I also became what was called a SWAT alternate at the time, where I wasn't on full-time SWAT. But if we had a call out or anything, or search warrant, so forth, I would go work with the SWAT team on that. And
so you kind of
from narcotics,
everywhere.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I worked narcotics for almost 2 years. Then also did my first master's degree, the thesis on the success of boot camps and drill academies at the time in the state of Florida. I think there was 8 when I did my thesis, and we had one of them. And then after narcotics, long story short, an opening came as the commander of the drill academy, and I was promoted then. I got to spend almost 2 years working with young men trying to change their lives around, which was to this day, one of the best jobs I've ever had.
So there's the boot camp. So explain the difference between what the boot camp situation would be versus the drill academy.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a different name, but it was really the same concept.
Okay.
I think there at that time there was maybe 2 or 3 drill academies, and then, like I said, maybe 5 or 6 boot camps. Same concept. And what it was both a residential and out care program. So we would get platoons of 15 every 3 months, and it was a 6-month residential, 6-month aftercare program. And it was based on the Marine Corps philosophy and receiving philosophy. So we bring them in, put them on the golden footsteps, as they say, and try to rehabilitate them over that 6-month period in discipline, education. We were partnered with the Collier County Public School System, so we had teachers right on premise, therapists, that was part of their mandatory.
What was about the ages?
13 to 18. Could not be over 18. And
so youth.
Yeah, young men. And when we first opened it, when I say some of these young men were hardened, they were hardened. I mean, some of them had up to, I want to say, 30 felonies when we first opened it, to get the worst of the worst at that point, in there and try to change their lives around. And some of the stats were crazy, as far as 80% of them were addicted to some sort of drug, whether it was marijuana, cocaine, those huffing. Believe it or not, if people don't know what huffing is, spraying spray paint into a bag or a jar and then stick it up to your face. And I will tell you, we had 3 of those young men.
You can die from that.
Yeah, and it really does affect you.
That's what they used to call whippets, I think, when I was younger.
Same kind of concept. Yeah. And I will tell you, it was probably one of the most addictive. And those young men, like I said, we had 3 over the time I was there that had done it. Really, really had dramatic impact on their thinking process.
Because it does mess with your brain, because it cuts off oxygen, I believe. Yeah. So let's no huffing.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
No huffing.
Actually, no drugs.
Yeah.
We're just going to go with no drugs.
No, we're going to stick to that, and it's always been good.
It's a good, healthy philosophy.
I agree.
I believe.
Yeah, so do I. So do I.
And I think that something happened post-cigarette smoking. Everybody was like, no cigarettes in the schools. I went to a high school briefly that if you were old enough to buy cigarettes, which was if you were a senior, they had a smoking section in the school.
Really?
Yeah, up in Connecticut.
I'm sorry, that was unheard of.
For just a brief amount of time. Yeah. So you could smoke in school, and I was shocked. I was like, what?
Don't you remember people used to sneak into the bathroom and try to smoke, and if you got caught, you got expelled?
Well, it's Connecticut, and it's some people say it's liberal, but having grown up there, it is kind of that independent liberal. And the philosophy was, they're old enough to buy it, they're going to do it.
Sure.
So let's just not screw up the inside. Let's just give them this outside, and it snows half the year. And it's cold.
So
if they want it that bad,
we're
going to make them stand outside in the freezing
cold.
For it. So exactly. So it was kind of like, it's not worth it. Yeah. It's just everybody stayed inside kind of thing. But so now you had taken. Where's my notes here? We got so far off track here.
Sorry about that.
This is why I like getting people in the chair, because you hear stories that aren't part of the bio.
Sure.
Like about the dairy farm and growing up and all these other things, or the drill stuff. I mean, it was in here, but we don't get to hear all that just off of the paper.
Sure.
So I'm okay with losing the notes. So you were instrumental and had a leadership position when we had things like Irma, COVID, but then we also had like the protests.
Yes.
Where were you within the sheriff's department at that point? I believe you were in some sort of leadership, right? Off the patrols.
Yeah. So I was the chief of operations. And,
that's what.
And the way we're structured is during those types of situations, whether it's a natural disaster, terrorism, strike, civil unrest, things like that, brush fire. Excuse me. I'm the incident commander for those operations, and taking guidance from the sheriff and so forth, but running the infield operations and so forth. So
when a hurricane comes, for example, it's when we go where into the community, like after the storm passes or before the storm passes, or the calls that come in. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of pre-planning, as you know. We have plans. I'm a plan guy, so I put plans together.
Got binders on the shelf?
I do. It's one of those philosophies that we have of, it's going to be chaos in any of those situations, but you want it to be controlled chaos.
Yeah.
And you got to have a starting point. So we've always had the philosophy of, let's build a plan. We know it's 99.9 going to change, but it gives us a starting point. So during the crisis, we don't have to look at each other and go, what do we do now?
Right.
It goes back to, it's a simple philosophy from the military, especially special operations: solve the problem. And that's really what we do every day: solve the problem. Yeah. So if you have a starting point, you're well off down the road more than most places.
I agree with the being prepared, planning and preparing, in case you don't need it.
Right.
If you don't need it, great. It just sits on the shelf, but it's ready to go.
Agree.
So here's a question I had just thought of because it came to my mind.
Sure.
We live in a place that's relatively, people say, safe and kind of calm. I mean, especially this part of town that we're in right now, Old Naples. It gives that appearance of crime not being crazy, although I've seen some crazy things the last few years.
Sure.
That'll be my next question. When it came to things like, we've never had a protest. I mean, we've had some gatherings and rallies over the years.
Right.
It always happens. They'll get by the courthouse. They don't like something. But we actually had like a whole down 41 march.
From the courthouse down here.
That was a first.
Oh, yeah.
So how did that feel internally inside the department for you being basically in charge of that?
Sure. Well, like you said, it was one of those things. I wouldn't say it was unexpected because our intelligence group and so forth had done a great job gathering information. So we knew the potential was there, luckily. It's one of those, we always, do a lot of research. We actually met with the organizers ahead of that event the very first night. Obviously, they didn't say anything of that aspect of it. But we had our groups, we're trained in civil unrest. We have field force members that are trained. We have our emergency response team, which is about 40 members within the agency that have specialized training in various areas that assist with the field force civil unrest aspect. So with that all being said, we were watching it. We had a lot of people in place, but there was a big turnout that day, as you remember, more than what we even anticipated and what we had gathered. Found out later, a lot of people were brought into town from out of town. We know that factually because of some of the arrests we made and so forth. And long story short, so when they started moving, they literally all at once, they sent a code on their phone and they all stood up and they just started marching down towards Fifth Avenue. A couple things that really fell into place for us. We had a lot of people on duty. We were prepared for that aspect of it. So we were able to shift resources immediately. This part, a lot of people don't know, FHP luckily was doing training in Fort Myers. And they were I got a lot of respect. I've known Captain Mike Gideons forever. We worked in Mockley together close to 30 years ago now. So he was one phone call away. I called him because we want to get as many boots on the ground as possible. And he said, Jim will be right there. And they were within 30, 45 minutes. I want to say they brought about 40 or 50 troopers that night that were literally trained in that aspect. That's what they were doing. So when we put our groups together, it really, I think, surprised the other side. And then obviously every night from then forward, we had various protests from Marco, as you remember, for about the next 10 days.
It was kind of like this day, then it would be kind of, and then the next day, and then it would just kind of almost like a wave.
But once we had the second night, if you remember, they call it the stand at the bridge. Well, we did a lot of this on purpose.
No.
Yep, we let them all get down into the funnel point, and we had boats obviously down in the water and so forth. But once we had them in the choke point there's not a whole lot you can do as far as them pushing forward unless they wanted to become violent, which luckily they didn't, other than a few others that tried to go around the side and and so forth. So
because you need a permit for a parade, so you need a permit for a protest.
That is correct.
I'm pretty sure in most communities you do, and it's not. People think getting a permit is like against your civil rights or something, and I think it's more just so we're prepared for traffic and keeping people safe more than it is the opposite. That's what's being said.
No, and you bring up a great point. Listen, I'm a big constitutionalist. You've known that for a long time. So I am all about, your First Amendment and right to protest and right to freedom of speech. But there's a way to go about it legally, and there's a way not to. And we encourage, that's why we try to make contact with any organizers. If we get information that one of these events is going to occur, we actually have a pamphlet that is made up to explain to them what they can, what they can't do. We encourage them, by all means, exercise your First Amendment, but you can't be impeding the flow of traffic. You can't come here and put your hands on a deputy or spit on a deputy, or anybody else in general. You can't come here to commit crimes of, vandalism and things like that. Because I will tell you this, and you see the look on my face, that is one thing we don't play with in this town.
No,
And we won't tolerate it, because I think that's what happened across the country. Places tolerate it, and they gave an inch, and then 6 inches, and then a foot, and before you knew it, they lost control of their communities.
I think it's that bad apple theory too. Not that I don't want to lump everybody together in, if I feel strongly about an issue and the guy next to me is the one that gets out of control, it's not my fault. He's the bad apple and he drags 6 other people with him. Meanwhile, me and my 2 friends are over here going, I guess we're just going to go home now because we don't want to be involved in that. So it is unfortunate that that happens.
No, and it's funny you say, we call it hijacking an event. You'll have these organizers from outside, which we found later on, some, people had good intentions, some, they just wanted to be heard, while other people had bad intentions of using that event to monopolize either on what was going on nationally and or their own agendas. And
I think Naples can become a target in the rich people community, creating havoc, or they're not letting us say something, creating havoc. And I look at it this way, because my mom was a 60s flower child, total activist. I mean, civil rights, she had the signs. I just found out there was a couple things she was at dinner. I'm like, you were where? I don't even, what? So, as they get older, you hear more stories. And, but that's what the sidewalk was made for, with your sign and with your voice and with your bullhorn or whatever it is. But you're not in the road, so you're safe. You're not going to get hit by a car. I always look at it that way, like, why do you want to be in the road?
No, exactly.
Be safe. And I think also that's one thing, kudos to Collier County for sure, because I live in a part of town that's near an outdoor mall. And there, during that week, the stores kind of cleared out a lot of their merchandise. And but one thing I noticed, because I live really close to that mall, and I went by there, and I started, as a resident of my community, watching what's on the news, I started to get very anxiety, like, maybe I should have taken that firearms course. All of a sudden these things come to your head and in your brain, and you start sleeping, and you're like, I can hear when people are at that mall sometimes. And then I drive by and I see there's a deputy there. He's just like, I want to let you all know I'm here. I was like, oh, okay, that made me feel better. And we ended up not having an incident at that outdoor mall, but it was kind of one of those moments where you really start to think about what's going on in the world and the people that keep you safe. And very grateful for them. Because there was nothing that happened down there. So that made me really happy.
The community, Kristen, was great during that whole time. They were very supportive of us, whereas you watch national news, not all communities are supportive of law enforcement. So we live in a special place here, as we'll talk about, and very supportive community for not only our agency, but public safety in general. And it is one of the things that, people go, when you ask people why they move here, one of the usually highest things is they feel safe, and they like the protection and the quality of life that's here, and we take that very serious.
Well, and people don't realize that part of the quality of life of a neighborhood is safety. It's not just the jobs, it's just not just how much money,
huge part,
or manufacturing or any of that kind of stuff. A big part of it is your services, your education, as well as what keeps you safe, which is your sheriff's department or police department, for sure. So now, since you've been in Collier County, it has grown.
Yes, tremendously.
Like, we've doubled in size, I think, since you've been here.
At least.
At least, right? We're not counting season. Let's not count season.
Season's a hard number.
It's insane. You never know what you're going to get in season for numbers. So since you've been here, how are you manage over 1,400 people in the department?
Just shy of 1,400.
Okay.
Between corrections, law enforcement, and civilian professional staff.
How do you approach leadership on such a big scale? Because it's not a corporation, but I would almost think there's some similarities.
Yeah, there definitely is. And you do it by delegation, you do it by sectors. We're set up just like a normal business, with the sheriff, myself, and then you have command staff, and you have layers of responsibility underneath that. And that's really what you have to do. And the key is finding good leadership. I truly believe in that too. And putting the right members in the right place to lead the agency down the path. And you have to always evolve. You always have to train and stay at the forefront of training trends. I mean, law enforcement has evolved in 31 years like you can't imagine, with the use of technology and standards and law changes and so forth.
Wow. I all of a sudden had this thought of like corporate meetings, and I'm like, wow, so you guys have meetings and have to
We do.
train on these new technologies and then decide what to buy with the new technologies.
Exactly.
But unlike a corporation, you're kind of beholden to your taxes.
We are. You got to stay within a budget every year.
You got that budget.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've been very blessed. We have a great commission that those of your listeners that don't know, our budget, the sheriff's office isn't a taxing authority. The commission is. Yeah. So the sheriff is a constitutional officer that answers to nobody but other than, he doesn't even answer to the governor, but that's the next level. With that being said, our budget, we have to go to the commission every year and present a budget of what we believe, what the sheriff believes is necessary to run our agency for the upcoming year.
So it's a forecast even.
Yes.
Wow.
And projections of growth and cost of living and everything else, which is very challenging, especially in our area, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on with housing and the inflation aspect and so forth. But long story short, we've had a great commission for the majority of the years I've been here. Very supportive, understand the importance of public safety and law enforcement, and truly have given us good budgets that we can work with and continue to build out. Because we're an agency of people. So about 80% of our cost is for salaries and benefits and insurance and Medicare and Social Security and a lot of things people don't realize. So, but we're an agency of people. That's what makes us great. That's what makes any agency in law enforcement or public safety. You're only as good as your people. So we want to hire the best people and we want to retain the best people and get them there. And part of the way to do that is you got to pay them well. It's not a cheap place. You want to give them the very best equipment in the country that you can. You want to provide them with the best training you can. And you want to keep this a fun place to work and a good place to work.
You just hit on something that's key that even people in corporate talk about is keeping your people happy and giving them all the tools. That way you have a successful outcome. So it doesn't matter if it's business or the sheriff's department.
No, a lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities. I think that's going to be interesting to a lot of our listeners because we think of it's the sheriff's department or, it's the police department. You know, what are they doing today? And it's like, wait a minute. When you really look at everything that goes into it, it's like, wow. Like teachers, I think you guys are underpaid, but that's just me. So you said your father was a veteran of both wars.
Yep, the Korean and Vietnam War, yes.
And so how did his service influence and knowing that, I mean, you were young, but how did that background influence you going into the sheriff's department? Yeah,
so he was at that time, when you hear the stories, my father was one of them, he actually did not tell the truth about his age in order to get into the military. So he started at 17 to get into the military and then go to the Korean War. I say that because it left a severe impression on me of someone who was willing to give everything they had to their country and their community. And like I said, he did several tours in both Korea and Vietnam. And the sacrifices, and I saw, the time, even though, like I said, he died when I was 4.5. And I don't have a whole lot of memories, unfortunately, but I also do remember, the things that he gave up and the time away from family so that he could serve. And it's left a strong impression as far as not so much the time away from the family, but my willingness to give everything you have to bring out the best.
To the community.
Yeah. And that's what we have here in Collier County. Not me, but the sheriff's office in general. And quite frankly, I hate to keep saying, but our public safety and our workers, I see it every day of the dedication of the men and women that work here.
Some of them are just out,
while you and I are asleep, at nighttime at 0 dark 30, at 2 a.m., whatever it might be, they're out there working. Now, I did plenty of shifts like that, I promise you. Luckily, I don't have to do it too often anymore, but they're out there, and that's what makes us safe. It's what keeps the machine going. And it's definitely, like I said, I learned a lot from my father in that aspect of giving back to your community and your country.
Wow. Yeah, I think that comes from a lot of veterans, but I also, my grandfather, when he served, I got to know him growing up, but there was always this, it's not all about you.
Right.
It's about the community you live in.
Yeah.
And he was really, he built the church and all that kind of stuff too, but it was all about that. And I think when you come from that military background family, you kind of have that. Kind of travels with you.
I agree.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, speaking of family, your wife Samantha, you live here and you both live here in Naples.
Yes.
So how do you balance? Because now you're the undersheriff. First you're on the road, first you're in the jail, then you're on the road. Now you're the undersheriff. How do you balance that relationship and community? Because you give a lot back to youth. I want to grab that before we leave too.
Yeah.
and then you have three kids between the two of you. So
Yes.
like, tell me, like, how do you do that? How do you balance?
It's challenging at times to say, but I think it starts with we both have the same core values and the importance of family. I'm still very now that we only have one left at in the house. The other two are out now and doing extremely well. As we were raising them, it was very important for me and for her every night to sit down at a table and have dinner together and talk about the day. I'll go ahead and say, talk about politics, talk about what was happening in the world, ask them how they were doing. That was a basic core to us every day in that aspect. You had to make time. Now, would my schedule always allow to her? No. But what we didn't allow is for it to become a habit or of where, we'll catch up tomorrow. We'll catch up tomorrow. No, we're going to catch up tonight and spend time together. Same thing with keeping our kids very involved in either sports or other activities, making sure that we were there for them for that and helping them grow and letting them make a few mistakes along the way. As you can't be there to hold I think that happens too much in society now too. Parents want to and I get it. You always want to protect your kids, but you got to let them grow. You got to let them make some mistakes, and you can't always make excuses for them. And you got to, hold them accountable. But that's a long-winded answer. You got to make time for them. And at the same point, I've been blessed, as you said. I have a phenomenal wife, and my children, they have realized the commitment that I have made to the agency and the community, and they have supported me the whole way.
Oh, that's amazing. That's good.
And I couldn't have done this job without them and their support and their love for me and their understanding of, have I missed major events of theirs? I have, as a result of this. Even hurricanes, Sammy will tell you that I try to send them out of town, and people are A, I want them to be safe, but B, and she'll tell you, and it's a joke around the family, I tell her, I need to concentrate on the agency and the community. And if you're here, I'm going to worry about you, literally. I know some people are going to probably take that the wrong way, but it's all the best intentions. And that's part of when you take on this responsibility, this role as the undersheriff or other, positions within the agency. Don't do it if you're not willing to do some of these sacrifices and these things. And they're great about it. They want to stay here and they want to be here, but they also understand I can't be distracted and worrying, because I will. And I still worry about them even when they're out of town, but at least I know they're safe somewhere else, and then I can concentrate on the business.
Well, you have to be concentrating on what you're doing, and it's, as a father, as a husband, it's natural to want to be worried about.
You worry about them nonstop.
You're going to worry about them nonstop, but at least if you know they're in a place that there's not 100 miles an hour wind or rising waters, it takes that little bit of worry off.
It really does. It really does.
So I mean, I totally get that. I totally get that. So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about, you really heavy in the youth involvement. Now, did that start like out in Immokalee, or how did that become like really the passion of yours?
It really did start in Immokalee, and it's going to sound corny, but as I worked for a great sergeant out there named Bob Lewis, and one of the things that I've said this before, people have heard me say this, one of his big things was getting out and doing foot patrol on the south side of town, and we would get out and we would walk at night, and we would get to know the community. It was a big thing of his, and I'm forever grateful to Bob for that. Sergeant Lewis, retired Captain Lewis now. He retired as a captain of special operations. But with that, I got to know a lot of the youth out there, and then my former brother-in-law was actually a coach out in Immokalee, so I got to know all the kids on Larry Wilcox and now and all that.
Yeah.
He was one of those kids. And so I got to know all those young men growing up, and it really inspired me, because prior to that, then, that's what somewhat inspired me to want to run the boot camp and the drill academy and spend time with those young men. With that being said, all they need is one break, one chance, and you might do something for a young man or woman that'll change them for the rest of their life. So that always inspired me, and with that then led into Make-A-Wish, Starability.
Yeah, you've been involved in everything.
Everybody knows I got a soft spot when it comes to kids. I really, and the community we live in a great community, and there's no reason why we as members cannot give back. And it's the foundation, it's our future. If you don't get that right as a community, I think you're failing. I really do. And as a person, I think we all have to, invest in our youth some way, some form, some fashion, whatever that may be, because they are the next man in, as they say.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Education and helping them when they're down.
Yeah.
Giving them the right guidance. Because as we started this conversation, was there are some people out there who just didn't get that.
Right.
They didn't get that break. They didn't have those parents. They didn't have that direction. I mean, I was fortunate. My mom had a substance abuse issue when I was young, when I was really little, but I had my grandparents. So I actually didn't even know about it until I was in my 20s.
Right.
I mean, some things made sense later.
Sure.
But I'm really grateful because what if somebody wasn't there to pick up that piece, which was me, during that time? It just takes that one turn.
Exactly.
One way or the other. So I think you almost answered my last question, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Sure.
So reflecting on all of this journey, what advice would you give to young people who aspire to follow in your footsteps or in the sheriff's department or just in life?
Yeah, in life, I think there's several things. No matter what obstacles you ever face with, don't give up. You know, life is not fair, as I tell my kids. It's a difficult world out there, but it's a great world full of opportunity. And I mean that. You can see me smiling. You know, I'm a simple country boy that literally, I joke, I outpunted my coverage. You see, I get emotional because if you'd have told me, you know, even 31 years ago, you're going to be living in Florida, you're going to have a great family, you'll be the undersheriff, I'd have been like, what? But along the way, I've had some tough things, you know, to face with. I never gave up. Look for some mentors in your life. Because I've had some great mentors, and I've had some people that have taken me under their wing, such as Chief Sally, Sheriff Rambosk, I can go on and on, Captain Bob Lewis, a lot of those people, and they've taught me so much over the years of resiliency and leadership and things like that. As a young man and woman, sorry, it's a long answer.
No, it's okay.
But look for those people in your life and truly try to be a sponge and learn from them. Because you'll carry that on for the rest of your life. And then just keep working hard, you know, and not, when I say this about as far as education, I'm a true believer of education, always learning. Even at 55 years old, I'm big into, you know, constantly trying to read and learn, constantly try to put yourself out there and learn. And I'll leave this last thing that I always tell my two daughters. Try to be 1% better each day. Don't set your goals too lofty or whatever so you get frustrated. All you got to do is be 1% better the next day or the next week. And before you know it, those 1% become 2%, 2% become 10%. And before you know it, you're 100% better than you were a year ago. And that's, and you just really take a piece of the pie, bite by bite. So,
no, I love that. What a great place to end our interview. I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for being here today, Colonel Jim Bloom, the Undersheriff of Collier County. And thank you so much to our viewers and listeners for joining us today on the Kristen Weardon Show. Remember to like, subscribe, follow, and share so we can bring you more inspiring guests like today. And have a great day. Life is a journey filled with challenges, but those challenges don't have to hold you back. They can be stepping stones to something greater, a life of hope, joy, and purpose. Hi, I'm Kristen Weardon, and my passion is helping you unlock your inner potential. No matter what your past may look like, your past does not need to define your future. Whether you're recovering from a difficult relationship or trying to overcome the challenges of your backstory, I'm here to guide you every step of the way. I offer a range of services tailored to fit your unique needs. Everything from one-on-one coaching, group coaching, to foundation building challenges, and even accountability check-ins. Together, we can create a path that leads you to the future you deserve.